This review video is for Math 6. It's going to cover sections 5.1 to 5.4. So we'll be talking about ratios, filling ratio tables, rates, unit rates, equivalent rates, as well as deciding what is the better buy. So there's a lot to cover in this review video today. So let's go ahead and get started. And we are going to start with writing a ratio. Here we want to write a ratio comparing parrots to flowers. So the important piece here is we make sure we go in the correct order. So parrots to flowers. So we have 4 parrots, 3 flowers. So there's 3 different ways you can write a ratio. One is the fraction format. So we've got 4/3, 4 parrots to 3 flowers. We've got 4:3, and then 4 with the word 2, 3. All of them are read as 4/3. Here we start with fraction form because we see if we need to simplify for our other 2 formats, but since 4/3 can't be simplified, we are done there. So it's 4/3. We're going to go ahead on to the next one. Here it says write a ratio comparing squares to shapes. Now here shapes is a little bit less specific. Squares is actually talking about these 3 squares here. Shapes is all shapes. So this is considered a part to whole ratio. So we need to figure out how many total shapes there are. So this is the total amount. So if we were to count all of our total shapes, we've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. We have 18 total shapes. So squares, since it is listed first, we put that in our numerator. 18 is our denominator, so 3 to 18. Now here we can simplify. We can divide both numbers by 3. They have that common factor of 3. So when we divide both by 3 here, we get 1 as the numerator and 6 as our denominator. So this means for every 1 square, there are 6 shapes. So that's the simplified version there. So we need to write that in all 3 formats. So 1:6 and then 1:6. And that is our final answer there. Our next slide is finding the missing values of the ratio tables. Now we're going into ratio tables. So what we're trying to do here is make sure that each column is an equivalent or equal ratio. So here we either multiplying by the same number or dividing by the same number. So we're going to start with shoes and boots here since that's what we're given. And we see that our next column of numbers, we have 8. So we're going to go from 2 to 8. And the way we get from 2 to 8, multiplying by 4, we have to do the same thing up here, and we're showing how we get our number. So 7 multiplied by 4 gives us 28. And then from here, we can't think of a way to get from 28 to 49 by multiplying. I would start all the way back to our beginning numbers. So from 7 to 49, we multiply by 7. We need to do the exact same thing down here, multiply by 7, and we get 14. Now we've got our 3 equivalent ratios, 7 shoes to 2 boots, 28 shoes to 8 boots, and 49 shoes to 14 boots. In order to make sure we know that these are equivalent or equal, what we look for is if we were to simplify these, would they still equal our beginning ratio of 7 to 2? So here they would. So we are good on that. Now we're actually going to move right into writing rates. The big difference here, writing rates compared to writing ratios, is that rates have units. So here we've got label or liters and we've got minutes. So we need to make sure that we label. So I would suggest writing rates need labels in order for us to remember that. That's a really, really important piece. That's the big thing that determines rates versus ratios. So here we're talking about liters and minutes. Now, when we're given this double line graph picture, all you need to do is make sure you pick 2 numbers that are lined up. So we could really pick any of these columns here. It does not matter which one you choose, since we're just writing a rate, not a unit rate or anything like that. We aren't simplifying. So if we picked this one here, this middle one here, we would have 30 liters over 9 minutes, and that would be our rate. We could write any rate. We could do 10 liters to 3 minutes, 20 liters to 6 minutes, or the other 2 there. As long as you make sure that you label, you should be okay. Where we do need to start simplifying when we talk about unit rates. So here, a unit rate is when the denominator is 1. That's a really, really important thing to remember. Our denominator needs to be 1 for this situation. So this is a rate. We do have labels. So we take this situation here, 12 touchdowns, and we're going to write this in fraction form. So 12 touchdowns in games. We want to know the unit rate for that situation. We want that denominator to be a 1. So here it's 1 game. So in order to get from 6 games to 1 game, we divide by 6. We do that exact same thing, that top number there. So 12 touchdowns divided by 6 gives us 2 touchdowns. So our unit rate is 2 touchdowns per game, as opposed to 12 touchdowns per 6 games. We're going to go ahead and do another example like that. Again, we need to do a unit rate, so our denominator needs to be a 1. We're going to take our situation that we're given here, 15 text messages. I'm just going to write 15 texts in 5 minutes. We want to know per 1, how many texts per 1 minute. That's going to be our unit rate. So here we divide by 5, and we get 3 texts per minute. And that, again, is our unit rate. Our next problem is a word problem. Here it says 3 album downloads costs $36. So 3 album downloads cost $36. How much do 5 album downloads cost? So here we're given a rate. So we're going to go ahead and take that rate, 3 downloads. I'm actually going to move that down. So we've got 3 downloads. And we know that that costs $36. We want to know how much 5 album downloads cost. So here, we don't really have a clear way to get from 3 downloads to 5 downloads. So if we thought about it as a ratio table, money, and then downloads, 36 for 5. There's really no clear way, or excuse me, 36 for 3. There's no clear way to get from 3 to 5. So we're going to have like a middle step. We're going to pretty much simplify here. We're going to find the unit rate. So we're going to find per 1 download, and that'll help us find out how much 5 downloads cost. So here I'm going to put D for download. So $36 divided by 3 gives us $12. So now we know we're paying $12 for every 1 download. From there, we're able to figure out how much 5 downloads cost based on our unit rate. So if we were to multiply 1 by 5 to get to 5 downloads, we do the same thing to our 12, and we end up getting 60. So here, 5 album downloads costs $60. So we took our basic rate that we were given, we found the unit rate, which is $12 per 1 download, and used that unit rate to find another amount of downloads. So 5 album downloads, we took 5 separate 1 downloads. So multiplied 12 by 5 and got $60. Again, we have another ratio table here. We're finding the missing values. To get from 3 to 12, we multiply by 4. We do the same thing here. 8 times 4 gives us 32. Again, if there's not really a clear way to get from our middle number to our end number, I always like to start at the beginning since I know these numbers are correct because I was given those numbers. So 8 times 6 gives us 48. We have to multiply the same thing here. 3 times 6 gives us 18. So we found those 2 missing values. Again, we're going to do another writing the rate of a situation. You can pick any of these to write rates as long as your numbers line up and as long as your rate is labeled. So I'm going to go ahead and do 10 tickets, 40 points. That is one of 5 rates that you could choose. Remember, we don't want to use 0 and 0 because that really doesn't give us any information. We want to use the numbers that actually give us some value. So again, we're going to move right back into unit rates. So here we are given 80 entries in 4 contests. So we want to set that up, 80 entries in 4 contests. And we want to know the unit rate. So we want that denominator to be a 1. So here this is 1 contest. So in order to get there, we have to divide by 4. We do the same thing to our top number. So 80 divided by 4 gives us 20. So 20 entries per 1 contest. So now we're going to jump into equivalent rates. We haven't done one of those yet. So we have a couple rates that we are given. 17 heartbeats in 15 seconds, 68 heartbeats in 60 seconds. So what we need to do first is take these 2 rates and write them as a fraction form. So I've got 17, and I'm going to do HB for heartbeats in 15 seconds. And we want to know, is that equivalent or is that equal to 68 heartbeats in 60 seconds? So when you're deciding if 2 things are equivalent or equal, there's a few ways we had practiced figuring that out. One way would be to simplify each rate to see if they ended up equaling the exact same thing, or we could get a common denominator and then compare the numerators. So for here, when I look at my denominator of 15 and 60, I think my very first thought is getting a common denominator of 60. Then I'm only really changing one of my fractions. So in order to get a denominator of 60, we have to take our 15 seconds and multiply it to make it larger. So we multiply 15 by 4 to get 60, so we have to do the same thing to our numerator. So we have got 60 seconds here. 17 multiplied by 4, that gives us 68 heartbeats. We did not have to change our second ratio, or excuse me, our second rate, because we were already given the 60 seconds. So I decided to make my denominators equivalent here to compare. So since we have the exact same rate on either side, yes, these 2 are equivalent. So we could have also tried to simplify this 68 over 60 and to see if we ended up with 17 over 15. That would be another way to decide. But whether or not we do common denominator of a larger number or simplify down, we're trying to decide, is one rate equivalent or equal to the other? Our last problem is better by. So we're deciding if A or B is the better, or I guess the cheaper amount or the better value. So here, cost per can, we've got $15 for 18 cans or $9 for 12 cans. We could also, there's 2 different ways we could do this. We could find a unit rate for each one of these, or we could find a common denominator similar to what I did on the last problem. So here, when I see if I had to get a unit rate on A, I'd have to divide by 18. Well, 15 divided by 18 is not going to give me a nice number. So I'm actually going to find a common denominator here between 18 and 12, and that's going to give us 36. So I multiply 12 by 3. I do the same thing to our numerator. 9 times 3 gives us 27, so it's $27 per can. For 18, I need to multiply by 2. I do the same thing to the numerator, so that's $30. So here now we have the same amount of cans, different amount of money. So if we wanted to get 36 cans, I would rather pay $27 for those 36 cans than $30. So that's actually saving me $3. So for this problem, we would find B to be the better buy. So you can either get a common denominator or simplify them both down to get a unit rate. So this concludes our review video. Rewatch any sections you need to rewatch, look over notes, look over graded homework, and good luck studying.